Welcome to Samuel Olayoye. Today I want to be focusing on a very important aspect of career management, and it is when we consider saying goodbye to our current job, our current employer, and seeking for a new job. A lot of people have reached out to me to say, Samuel, when is the best time for me to start looking for a new job? Or what are the signs what are the indications that it's time for me to move on? So I just want to address this subject, once and for all. So the first thing that should come to mind, or the first thing that will begin to play out that you should start considering when to quit your job to look for another job, is when you have stopped growing in a particular organization. So if you've been going through the rank, let's say every year or every 2 years, you get that promotion, you're growing, but it then get to a point where you realize that it seems I'm now stagnant, I'm no longer growing, and then you've done all you could, you've taken on additional responsibilities, you've volunteered, you've done a lot of things to position yourself for that growth, and if that growth is not coming, then I think it's an indication that it might be time for you to consider moving on. Number 2 is when you have achieved your objective. So you need to reflect on when I was starting out this job, what are the things that I've set for myself? What are the career goals I have? Where do I want to get to in this organization? As soon as you get to that position, you want to ask yourself, now that I've attained this status, do I want to move on and look for something else to do? Okay, you need to think back to when you're first starting. You look at your goals, and if you have achieved your goal, then it might be an indication that it's time to move on. At times, you may need to set for yourself another goal or something that will also be motivating, but you also need to know that you have to develop along the line. But the bottom line is, when you think you've gotten to a certain level, it might be time for you to consider moving on. The next one is when you look for ways to avoid your job. You just want to avoid it. You realize you are just procrastinating. You realize that you need a lot of motivation and effort for you to even get any meaningful thing done. This might be a sign that it's time for you to move on. Okay, maybe at times you might even need time to take a break, to recharge. You just realize that it's not just as usual anymore. So this can be indications that you have to move on. And another important factor that is an indication that it might be time for you to move on is when you constantly approach your job with exhaustion, with dread, and at times with burnout. Okay, so when you are always dreadful about going to work, just opening your system, or just scared about that client or something, your heart just keep beating fast at the thoughts about a particular job or something. When you get to that level, my friend, you need to consider changing your job, because life is so short, life is precious, and anything that is going to really affect your overall well-being, you need to avoid. Your work should improve the quality of life you are living. It should not make your life miserable. When you get to a point where you constantly approach your job with dread, with burnout, with dread, no, that is not the type of job you want to remain in. It's definitely a time for you to consider moving on. The next thing that might be an indication for you to consider moving on is when your role no longer aligns with your personal values. So at times we grow to a certain point where we are exposed to certain things, and then what we have to do no longer align with the personal values that we hold as individuals. So when you get to a certain point where the things that you have to do or your role requires that you do certain things that are not consistent or not in alignment with your own personal values, my friend, it's time for you to move on, because you'll be always struggle when things become a matter of conscience, when things become the matter of your personal standard and what your job requires. When you have to struggle between those things, then it's time for you to move on. Finally, on that point is when your work or your workplace has become toxic. Okay, so when when the environment is toxic, a lot of issues, it then becomes a mental health issue, it then becomes a well-being issue. Then you need to consider that if there is no work-life balance, if it's constantly work, you have to balance work, things are not really happening as you would expected. If there is an unhealthy culture of extreme competition. People are just competing hard to win at all costs. People are ruthless, and that might be an environment that is an environment you don't want to remain in, because see, you don't want things that will really be affecting you. Your life, really, your work should really enrich your life. It should not make your life miserable. So when the work environment is becoming too toxic, it's becoming toxic for you. Maybe your managers are becoming toxic, your co-workers are becoming toxic, then I think it might be the right time for you to start considering moving on. And at times you might just need guidance, to walk through some certain challenges in the workplace. I believe you have picked one or two things from today's video. Please like this video. If you have not subscribed to my channel, what are you waiting for? Please subscribe. Also share this video with your friends. And if you've not pressed the notification bell, please press the notification bell so that when I upload new content, you will be notified. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.